So we have Rick and Tate here. Hello, Rick and Tate. This is, let's look up there, Ajahn Jyoti Palo, living at Birken Monastery, kind of as a resident right now, and I'm with Methiko from Empty Cloud. So, let's see. Are there any questions this morning? And I have looks like everybody at the monastery is here too. So if nobody does have any questions, we can start with the group here. They're probably tired of hearing me talk though. So Bhante and Aya gave the title something. It was a forum or monastic.
Sangha panel, creativity in the Dhamma.
Okay.
I believe the title was.
Yeah. So it was about creativity, and both Aya and Bhante have been inviting me for quite a long time to come visit Empty Cloud. I visited when they were out on Long Island, and I've known Bhante since I think I was probably traveling when he arrived at Abhayagiri, but I've known him since he was a lay person when he basically first arrived at Abhayagiri. And almost the whole time that I've known him, I've been working with using creativity as a meditation technique. And so I think that they probably like, okay, let's while Jyoti Pal is here, let's see if we can tap him for some of those resources. So maybe just before we even start, here, let me just let's see if you start with. You can kind of show these first four icons. So I got on my iPad here, I have got various images of some of the very traditional icon paintings that I've done. Go up a little higher. Yeah, there you go. So that painting there is probably about 9 inches wide by about a foot tall. Go a little higher and come back. So so you're just on top of the screen here. There you go. That's good. So this is Mary, and it's a copy of a Russian icon painting. So can you flip to the next one? Yeah. And then when I do icon paintings, especially when I was learning, I might do a series of like 4 paintings all together, just have all 4 of the boards together, and then just playing around with different styles, colors, techniques, just to see kind of what would work. And this was one I did of Saint Benedict when I was living at a Catholic monastery, actually, when I did these. Let's do the next one. And this was one, Aya Rochana. She was one of the first 4 Siladharas at the Amaravati Chithurst community. And she passed away on a pilgrimage in India. And I had found this, a photograph of her of this. And so I did this icon. Okay, next one. And this is kind of a very classical, it's from a photograph of Ajahn Chah. And so that was, I think this is one of the better ones that I ever did. Can I see the iPad for just a second? And then I'll have you show this one here. So this image here of Ajahn Chah, this is kind of after years and years of painting and developing the skills, that's what I was able to do versus this image here was the very first time I ever tried to do that as a painting. So it's basically the same image, but hopefully I was better in the last one than I was in this one. So this kind of painting here was done with very cheap fabric paints and something just like acrylic paints that you would paint on there. And then if it was like on a t-shirt, you'd use an iron to set it into the fabric. And so let me see that again. And that's how I started off painting. And and you can go backwards with these. So there's like 4 paintings here.
Okay.
And so when I seriously got into that, you can go a little closer to the camera there. So this was I had the idea actually when I first started kind of getting interested in Buddhist artwork. I was looking around at all the different sort of traditions of painting artwork, any kind of sculptures, or I didn't like any of it. It just didn't speak to me. It wasn't like from my culture. It didn't speak to me. And there was one of the teachers at Spirit Rock Meditation Center in California, Wes Nisker, and he used to do a radio show. And I guess he always signed off the show. He said, "If you don't like the news, get out and make your own." And so I kind of like, well, if you don't like the artwork, get out and make your own. And I did like Tibetan artwork a little bit, but none of it ever made sense to me. So I kind of had this idea of doing like a Tonka painting, and instead of having all the sort of various images around of Tibetan imagery, to do stuff like what was happening in the monastery. So here we were stacking firewood, and actually the monk there on closer to the green tape, this side over here, that monk is actually Tanpamuto. And Titapanyo, Ajahn Titapanyo Advaigiri is the other monk when they were very junior stacking firewood. Let's see the next one. This was a painting. You can come back a little bit or a little higher. Yeah. And then tilt it. There's the other way. Go the other way. Yeah, there you go. So the sun was in your thumb's in the way now. So this was Ajahn Dunn when he was visiting Advaigiri, giving a Dhamma talk. Next one. And this was from a photograph of in Thailand of 2 monks being on it's called Tudong, just wandering practice. So they have their alms bowls in those bags, and one of the lead, I guess probably both of them do. The lead monk has got like an umbrella, what they call a gloat, mosquito netting that they sleep in. So that was one thing. Yeah. Here. Yeah. Let's see. I was actually kind of the last one there, but then this one. And as I was doing these still really cheap fabric paints, this was one I did of white Tara, and yeah. So yeah, that's good. That's good. So, yeah, this particular painting here of white Tara was it this one? I'm trying to think which painting this happened with. Oh, hey, I don't have a picture of it here, but how I really kind of got into using creativity was, I think it was one year I think I'd moved up. Well, I moved up to Arrow River Forest Hermitage in Thunder Bay, Ontario with Ajahn Punadamo. And right before I went up there, I decided to, I visited my parents. And for some odd reason, I had like a 2-week visit with them, which was about 10 days too long. And so they had a nice basement. And my mother just bought these fabric paints. And she's an artist and really talented. And so she saw that, or I just had to do something. And I was getting ready to go to Arrow River. And I knew that they didn't have I wouldn't say very good artwork, but all of it was like 30 years old. It was like stuff that had been given to the monastery before they got there. And it was all really faded, and none of it was Theravadan anyway. It was like Tibetan artwork. And so I just got this idea. I had an idea for 4 paintings. And I did that. And I did one of Ajahn Chah when he was sitting in a chair, kind of a famous painting of him. And it actually came out really, really good. And so that the painting I showed of the really simple Ajahn Chah, that was kind of a step down when I first started painting. But I did these 3 paintings, and my mom noticed like how kind of absorbed I got into it and how interested. So she bought me she gave me those paints and bought some new ones. So when I got to Arrow River as part of my practice, because there you basically had 22 hours a day. You were completely alone. Like we gathered for the meal, and that was basically it for the day, and you're on your own. And so I took this practice of, even though I'd been an art major in college, it was more about academic and being able to write about art. And I did have studio classes, but I actually, I can show you like some of the stuff I kind of did when I was, this is right out of college, but this is the kind of stuff that I would have been doing. You can show that one and then go that way for that one. So this is actually really, really large. It's like 4 foot by 5 foot painting. Go up a little higher. Yeah, there you go. Of two canoers in a race. Go to the next one. And then there's a kayaker in water. I think that's the only two I have. Yes, that's good. So yeah, I was already kind of a serious. I never wanted to use art as for a livelihood, but it was a liberal arts education. So I had this background in art, but I never really got into like doing portraits or being able to do people very well. So I just decided for a period of time, I think I made a determination for 1 year of every day start to do some aspect of drawing or doing some artwork every day for at least 1 hour, and just to actually study what it was like to learn a skill and to actually learn something. And you can do that with chanting. Like, you start off, you don't, maybe even understand Pali, or I still don't understand Pali, but just not knowing the chanting at all, and just seeing how your mind learns, like how there's various techniques you can do to learn chanting, and you can just study yourself and see, like, well, how do I learn? And so I did that with drawing and in the artwork. And so I just painted kind of every day. And it was interesting. I tell people, like, that one image of Ajahn Chah, the really crude one to the really beautiful one of the icon painting, that I couldn't tell you actually like what I learned. It was kind of nonverbal, but I could tell that I was learning. But I got to a point where, actually I don't have an image of that one, but I got to a point where I could do that painting and it was nice, and I could get it to turn out 90% of the time I painted it. And then I kind of lost interest. Like I did what I wanted to do. And then several years later, we were doing a winter retreat at Abhayagiri. And what happened was, at Abhayagiri during that time, they probably still do this, but we might start off for a 3-month retreat where we just do solid group practice and it's a complete schedule. And then as people sort of settled down and got into the retreat, they'd open up the schedule. Like you might have the afternoon free or the morning free. And we were at a period for 2 weeks where we had the complete no schedule other than coming down for a teaching and the meal. And during that time, it was winter in California, which can be kind of mild, can be nice. But this day was just absolutely spectacular days where the temperatures are in the mid 70s and sunshine. And so I just started doing walking meditation in the morning and noticed it was time for the meal. So I went down, did the 2 hours down there and came back, and it was still beautiful. So I did walking meditation all afternoon. So I put in like eight hours of walking meditation, and it was time for, I would have just a regular tea time. So I went into my cabin to make a cup of tea, and I was just really tired from having done all the walking and being outside, and I could just feel like I wanted to go to sleep, but I was just like, it's 6 in the afternoon at that point. I was like, I can't go to bed now or lay down. So I was like, what am I going to do? And I had this realization, if I just closed my eyes and meditate, I was going to fall asleep. If I tried to read a book or something to raise the energy, I'd probably fall asleep. So I was like, I got to do something. And then all of a sudden I remembered I had 4 drawings of Ajahn Chah, quite large drawings, that I wanted to work on, or that I had started, but then when I lost interest, I just had them drawings, and I had the paint still. At that time, myself and a couple of the other monks were reading about Native American Lakota, the life of Lakota Indians, Native Americans. And all of a sudden this image popped into my head. If I could take those 4 drawings and just change them very subtly into being Buddha images instead of Ajahn Chah, and I could do them in the Lakota colors, the white, black, red, and yellow. And at that point, it was probably about 6 o'clock at that point. And so I started working on them, and I looked down and all 4 paintings were finished, completely finished. I hadn't got out of my chair, hadn't even drank water or anything. And I looked over at my clock kind of suspiciously, and it was 3 a.m. So 9 hours had just gone by that. And the paintings were finished and actually quite nice. And so I was wide awake, and I was just sitting there. I was like, wow, fully energized, wide awake. And so I decided I'll just go sit and meditate until went down for breakfast in the morning. And when I came down, Ajahn Pasno, my teacher, was there, and I told him what had happened. And his phrase was, "That's not insignificant. Pay attention to that." And so I decided at that point that I would actually take up the practice again of starting to paint. And I was still working with these really cheap fabric paints. And so I did. I don't know if I made a determination to do it every day, but I would do that. And then when I did this again the second time, I noticed that I used to be what I would call one of the headless meditators at Abhayagiri in the morning, where you look down and there'd be a whole line of us, there'd be shoulders and no heads. And I was definitely one of those, and I was always fighting my meditation and trying to stay awake and stuff. But as soon as I started painting, I was just solid as a rock, just a lot of energy. And I was also only getting about 4 hours of sleep at night. That wasn't good for me, but and I needed more than that. But I was only getting 4 hours of sleep, and I would just be wide awake. And so I did that for many years. I don't even know what the time frame on this is, but for a long time I started doing that. And then, kind of a funny story was then that Ajahn Punadamo came to visit us at Abhayagiri, and our next door neighbor is a Ukrainian Orthodox monastery, and the abbot there, Father Damien, is an icon painter. The very traditional egg tempera on wooden boards, and he does it just from scratch. Real beautiful process, and he's a really talented artist, icon painter. And Ajahn Punadamo is Ukrainian. So we decided just to take him over and show him the church. And I was like looking at the icons kind of with a critical eye, not critical, but just, discerning eye. And I must have made 1 or 2 many comments about the icons, or too many questions. And he looks at me and goes, "Are you an artist?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." And I said, and he goes, "Well, I'm doing an icon workshop next week. Would you like to join me?" And Ajahn Pasna was there, and he's like, "Yeah, go." And so I did an icon workshop, and one of the monks from Abhayagiri joined me. And as soon as I started painting with the traditional egg tempera painting, it was like that was the image that I was trying to, I had in my mind. So these cheap fabric paints, I was able to manipulate them quite well and be able to, kind of get the images I was wanting. But there was something like it didn't have this pop. It didn't have the feel of what I had in my mind of what I was trying to do. And I knew that, and I was like, okay, these paints are cheap, and I'm just doing this as a learning. I'm not wanting to make a living being an artist, and it's just as part of a learning process and using it as meditation. So I actually didn't care. People ask me, like, what did I do with my paintings? I usually just gave them all away, or they would just be like kind of like a study. That actually be quite. Actually, I hope he's watching this. I will send it to him. But I think the person who has the most, he says he has a huge collection of Ajahn Jyotipala's paintings, and that's Ajahn Kovilo. Mm-hmm. And he said he pulled them all out of the garbage. So, And yeah, it's like I would paint them, and they'd be like 90% finished, or I might make a mistake, and I just didn't, I didn't need to correct them and stuff, so I just start again because I was just painting every day. And so Kovilo must have been sneaking into my cabin when I wasn't around and pulling stuff out of my garbage. I don't know. I'll have to ask him about that one. But so anyway, I was not worried at all about what the product was. But as soon as I did this icon painting, I just like, oh, this is it. And so Father Damien gifted me a set of icon paints. And a couple of funny stories about that was that when I started, actually when I had those paints, it took me about 2 months to pick it up because I was like afraid, because it's like I had spent, at that point maybe 10 years learning how to use the cheap acrylic paints, and I could, like, if I wanted to get a facial tone, I knew exactly how to do it, like what combinations to make. But then when you work with egg tempera, you actually use the egg yellow, and then you either use vinegar or wine to kind of dilute it into almost kind of like a watery kind of substance. And then you add just raw pigments. It can be either crushed up like rocks and stones, or other. That's actually what most of the colors comes from those, or clays. And so to get the colors that I wanted, I was kind of like scared because I didn't know how to do that. And right now, I actually haven't done any icon painting for about 2 years, and I'm really into videography, trying to learn how to tell a story through video. And the monk that I'm living with, Ajahn Sona, has really made a huge investment and determination to be able to record, especially his teaching styles. He wants to be able to produce really high quality videos. So Ajahn Sona is his YouTube channel, and he has hundreds and hundreds of Dhamma talks. But one of the people at his monastery was a professional videographer, and so she really helped him get it set up, and then she taught me how to do videography. That's a whole other story, but that does relate to the creativity. And yeah, so then when I started go back to the icon painting, I was really afraid to get started into it. And I was just watching my mind of that, like, what's this? What's the fear of this? But then when I started iconography, or the videography, it was the same thing. I got a program to actually be able to edit, and I finally downloaded it, got on my computer, and I think I waited 2 or 3 months before I ever started to do with it. And I could see, because I was afraid. I was afraid of the unknown, uncertain, not knowing how to do that. But then finally picked it up, and then it was actually fun to kind of learn technology. And because at that point before that, I kind of joked here, and it's not really a joke, but I would have been a Luddite, break the machines. That was my, I used to be critical of monks that would be having iPhones or using computers, and I didn't feel like it was appropriate. But now I'm kind of definitely changed my attitude around that, and so see that there's benefits to that. So someone did ask Carson asked a question here. Do any monastics compose music as a practice, like do with your art? Not that I know of, Carson. The Buddha was pretty clear with we have a rule against actually playing instruments, and so I always do kind of feel bad for a lot of monastics do come from sort of the creative arts. I think it actually takes somebody with a creative mind to actually want to become a monastic, because it's like, we're turning against cultural norms, and just the what we've always been taught, that you go to school and you get a job and then you have a career and then you save money for retirement, and for anyone just to sort of say, nah, I'm not going to do that. You have to have some sort of creative plan for how you're going to survive then, and the monastic form does provide that. But then most of us in the West, we don't, even though you may have heard that, we actually really don't know, like, how does that work, because it's not from our culture. We've never really seen that. So it's I think it does take kind of a creative person to become a monastic. And so a lot of us are. And then, so I kind of feel sorry for people who are musicians because they have very clearly a rule against not playing instruments. But people who are writers, I know a lot of monastics who are, really, really talented, writing poems or short stories or, being able to write. I do know other people that have painting skills. That I've seen some people that have like little tiny notepads that they, like watercolors, little paintings that they can go out and do. So there's lots of avenues that monastics can do. I've seen people that have portfolios of like being photographers. Now some people that are videographers. So there's lots of means that people can do that, but music is one that not. And we were talking about that the other day. We had a talk, and somebody asked that about music, and I think partly it is that music is so not necessarily sensual, but it's got lots of hooks. It's like music is written to have a hook, so it gets in your mind and stays there. And for me, with my videography, I occasionally do use music to kind of help create the mood and give me the framework for how I would do sort of nature videos, but I try to do them with music, and it gives me a template of how to, like, where to make the cuts in the music, or it helps create a mood. And it works for me to do that because I have no music at all in my head. It doesn't exist. I used to beat myself up when I was younger because be with my friends, and somebody would just mention a new song that came out, and everybody would know the lyrics and would start singing along, and I would be like, that's what I heard in my head. Nothing. I would know the song, but it just wasn't in my head. I couldn't sing it. I couldn't remember the words. And the very first meditation retreat I ever did, I was fortunate and got to sit it with 5 of my best friends. And when we were driving back to where we lived, what happened? Oh, we were just comparing notes. It was all of our kind of like first retreats, and everybody started saying they had music in their head 24 hours a day and just couldn't get it out of their heads. And I was like, didn't hear a thing. And they all thought I was lying. And then it was the first time in my life I thought, wow, okay, that's not a curse that I can't hear music. It's a blessing. Everybody else has got the curse because they're hearing it. So it was kind of a fun realization. So anyway, for my making the videos, people sometimes have been like, isn't that distracting for you, or isn't that bad? I was like, nah. I don't, I'll hear it when I'm making the video, but then I turn it off, it's gone. Yes.
Don't you get images though of what you're working on? So you have to be selective with your.
Well, most of the videos that I do are nature videos. So.
But I mean, when you're painting, would you get like the image of the piece that you were working on?
It's really kind of funny. I don't. So the question is like when I'm doing icon painting or just doing painting, like, would it be distracting of having that image in front of me or in my consciousness as I'm going? It's really quite fascinating to me that like I can't draw. So it's like, I mean, if I sat here and had a pencil and I was watching you, I could draw you. But I know people who could just like look at you for 10 seconds and then sit down and draw you, and draw you almost perfectly just from their memory. But I don't have a mind like that. And so when I'm doing an icon painting, it's like the creativity is happening for me on the canvas. And that's why I actually kind of like the traditional iconography, because it's like this can be up to like 40 different layers of paint that you're using to get it. So for me, it's like the creativity is happening. It's not like the creativity is like to get to the end product. It's the whole development. And so I'll have an idea, like a mood actually, of what I want to create. And I'll just like keep manipulating it. And it's like, okay, that's it. I got to where I was looking for, but maybe didn't know actually like how I was going to get there. And so no, I don't have a memory that keeps things in mind like that. So that's maybe why it does work for me. But yeah, if it was I think I hold on to concepts and ideas. So like if someone says something rude to me, I might hold that all day long. Like going through my head, like, what did I say to them to make them react that way? What's wrong with me, or something like that, or what's wrong with them, or so I hold on to concepts, where I think some people give up concepts, but hold images or music. So getting some questions here. Let's see. Someone said, Richard said he started photography and digital art again, incorporated in AI. Yeah, I've actually not experimented with that. And yeah, that's quite fascinating. People have been sending me some images of AI. And does everybody here know what AI is? Yeah. Yeah, it's the computer technology has just gotten so powerful that somebody was telling me that I should ask. There's like programs you can go to, various websites that are AI generated, and said I should say the name of my YouTube channel and ask it to write me like a storyboard for doing one of my videos, and it'll go through and it'll watch every single video I've ever done and get a sense of what I do, and it'll lay out. Or the other thing too is like they're like political figures and stuff like that. It'll have all their images, and it'll say, okay, can you give me a photograph of this politician doing this nasty thing, like falling down a set of steps or something like that, and it'll create a very realistic image of that particular person. So it's almost like anymore. It's like if you see a picture of somebody, you can't trust it's you. And they're also using it in very nefarious ways, like using it to call your relatives and saying, I've just been kidnapped. Can you please send $1,000 to this address and they'll let me go. So it's like if you're doing what I'm doing right now, letting your voice be out there on the internet, someone can take my voice and manipulate it to say all sorts of stuff. So is this really Jody Paulo? Not sure. Yeah, someone asked us the question, no music, no dance? Not for monastics. No, you give up a lot choosing to be a monk or a nun, and that's one of them. And so it sometimes keeps people from ordaining. Yeah. Are there any questions here? I'm halfway through my spiel, but anybody? They've already heard me for 3 days talking about all this. So. Any other questions out there in, how would you say this, the video land? Did I miss any questions up here?
I don't think so. I think Linda has.
Oh, yes, Linda.
Thank you, Hassan. I'm just curious, how broadly you would umbrella creativity. And you're talking about sort of specific forms, but I think of, so if you could even just characterize, or as you go, just sort of, if, for example, I couldn't paint for anything in this world, but yes, I have views about maybe creativity and what that means. Anything you might say about that, at any time? No,
that's good. Yeah. So I was thinking. So I don't know if you could hear that out on your computers, but Linda, guest here, she just asked if, just about creativity in general, not just say from artwork. And I thought that was a really good question. And I was thinking about it last night. And so the act of meditation is very creative. And that's so like a lot of meditations are based on visuals. So it's like if you're or can be based on visuals. So if you're like say doing contemplation of the body parts, the 32 body parts, one way I was described to do that is actually if you're in Thailand, it's kind of easier to do, but you can actually go to autopsies. So oftentimes the monasteries might have some connections to hospitals, and you can go in when the medical students are doing autopsies. I was able to go to the police morgue on Monday morning after the weekend and there was a doctor. She was actually very, very famous in Thailand. She was known for not being able to be corrupted. So they would, because oftentimes the police would just say, if you can just say there's alcohol involved, then they don't have to investigate it. And so, for whatever reason, there might be reasons they didn't want to investigate something. And so she was known for not being able to be corrupted. But so I was able to go into an autopsy with her and a couple other monks. And the senior monk who took us on this, he was telling me, it's like, as we were going through, and she knew the monks were coming, so she did a really beautiful job of it. But as she was taking various organs out and stuff, and so he's like, memorize, what it looks like, how big it is, where it was in relationship to the other organs in the body, and the smells, all of this. And so when you then sat and meditated, you could actually bring up memory of that, the image of that. And so it's a real kind of experience. And also, if you don't have that kind of experience, you can get like encyclopedias or medical books, and you can actually sort of kind of memorize where all the organs are in your body. So then when you're sitting in meditation and you're sort of going through the various body parts, you're actually using your memory. You're actually thinking, and it can be a very creative way too. And so like using that as like a creative meditation, I remember when I was in Thailand during my third Vasa, I was sitting, and it was one of these days where it felt like it was 110 degrees and just 100% humidity, and it was just absolutely miserable. And I just had this meditation where I was contemplating the body like that. And I just, for some reason, I decided, okay, this is my meditation. I'm going to be creative with this. So I imagined the lab. I decided I was going to go into a laboratory to instead of just, imagine myself sitting here going through the body parts. I imagined this beautiful white laboratory room that was air conditioned. I remember making it air conditioned. And so I came in and I had a microscope and little slides, and remember like taking just the tissue of I was doing the hair of the head, so I took this hair and put it on the microscope on the slide, and I got down the microscope, and I could kind of see it as a tree trunk, because it was so large, and I'd seen an image of it, like in an encyclopedia, and it actually did kind of look like that in a photograph. There's hairs, there's different layers to it, and so it's like, there's the bark and there's the heartwood, and so in this imagery I was just imagining all that and creating that, and spent like an entire afternoon just sort of going through these different slides, and just was totally enthralled, and like 2 or 3 hours went by just doing this kind of meditation. Came back the next day after the meal and did the same. I was going to do the same meditation, but I remember it was even hotter, and so I came into this air-conditioned room and started meditating, and I was just like, let's imagine a lazy boy over there in the corner. It's this nice, comfortable chair, and so I went and sat down on it, and it's like, let's imagine some Simon and Garfunkel music. And so I started playing this with the speakers in the laboratory, and sat there for 2 hours, and just had this beautiful meditation, listening to Simon and Garfunkel in my head. I say I don't listen to music or hear music, but I did that day for some reason. And after the sitting was over, I went and I asked Ajahn, the abbot of the monastery. I asked him, I told him what I'd done, and I said, was that unskillful? He goes, you owe me 2 hours of meditation. He said, no, it was actually very skillful, very using your mind creatively, because I was sitting in meditation, but in my mind I was comfortable in a chair and enjoying what I was doing. But you could go off the deep end with that. Have you been reading these questions? Is there any good ones?
I think that there's a question there we have to.
Yeah. Oh, we got to go this way.
Yeah.
Go down to here to go up, or what?
Yeah. If you can scroll. Yeah.
Just a second here. Technical difficulties. You want to try that? I want to touch the screen. This is an old computer.
It's an old computer, and actually Tom Wade is better at I'm not used to this. Here we go. I think starting here,
Yeah. Hide. No, we don't want to hide it.
it comes up on
Oh,
the
okay.
screen.
It's spin on creativity. Understand trauma experience using. Yeah.
And then any comments on that?
Yeah, that's not really a question, but yeah, that's very.
And then I think he has comments on that. Any comments?
Yeah.
Comments?
Well, one thing I don't know, when a monk actually, or something, yeah, it was a monk friend of mine, actually recommended that I read Kurt Vonnegut, a book called Bluebeard. Here, has anybody ever read that book? Has anybody here ever? Yeah, I know many people who love Kurt Vonnegut, but I think very few people have even heard of this book. And but in this his book, there's this one art professor's talking to this student, and he makes this really beautiful comment that it's like he said that what this professor thinks is like what makes great art is an artist who's confronting their trauma, their difficulties, and confronting things that they aren't able to do, even as artists, like trying to create that. And he said it's the great art that's actually sort of is able to confront. He said things like trauma and pain. And so I think actually in the creative process there can be that. So like I was mentioning earlier, it's like when I first started with the egg tempera kind of painting, there was this paralyzing fear for me when I first started it. And maybe that's what I liked about it. What actually sort of challenged me in that medium was to really look at it, what it was I feared, and studying that, and then learning how I overcame that through being able to do a beautiful painting with that particular style. And then the same with videography. Like I said, I sat there for 2 or 3 months with this program before I ever actually picked it up. And it's interesting, maybe this is part of it too, I've never thought about this, but when I have a couple of like probably the best books in the world about iconography, and one of them is like about that thick, and kind of describes every single aspect of it. And I had this idea at one point I was going to read it through, but I hate doing that. And so it's like whenever I come up against a technical problem, I can go to that book and use it as reference. But like I don't like kind of reading like through manuals. And I noticed the same thing with the program I have for videography. Yeah. So oftentimes what will happen is I'll get an idea for kind of a creative image that I want to do. And sometimes I do, I have to go online to figure out how it is. But I had this idea of, I knew about like using a blue screen or a green screen to, add images into a thing. So there was one shot I did where there's this log on the marsh at Birken that comes out, and I was waiting for a perfectly blue sky, and so I got the camera kind of down below, shooting up at me, and so you see the log, and then it's a blue screen behind me just from the sky, and so I kind of sit down in the middle of the log, and I'd start my channel with hello, I'm Ajahn Jyoti Palo. Welcome to Sauntering into Silence. That's the name of my channel. And then, so I filmed, and then I kind of had this sort of dialogue with myself. And I filmed it 3 times. And the second time I filmed it, I was a little bit further over on the log. And then the third time I was on this side of the log. So as it pops up, sort of says, hello, I'm Ajahn Jyoti Palo. Welcome to Sauntering into Silence. And I go like this, and then the second person pops up and goes, no, I'm Ajahn Jyoti Palo. And then we both turn that way, and he goes, no, I'm Ajahn Jyoti Palo. And I kind of had the idea of doing this, and so I filmed it all 3 times. But then I could have gone online and actually, watched somebody or read the instructions about, like how to do that. But I refused to do that. I was like, I'm going to figure this out, how to do this on my own little program. And so it maybe took me a day or 2, but that's how I learn. Like I have a solution or a product that I want to get, and then it's like I just force myself to play around and experiment until I get it, and that's how I learn. Like if I had just read about it, I could probably do it, but then if you asked me to do it again, I probably wouldn't remember. But because I had actually punched all the buttons and made mistakes and learned how to do it, or that created something like I never would have thought of, and it's even better than what I thought. So that's kind of the way I kind of learn, is that way. That kind of brings up another point too, where when I first started doing the really thinking in terms of using creativity, and it can be like, however we're doing that, it's like, it can be visual arts, but it takes creativity to problem solve, anything. So like if, it doesn't even have to be in the arts. It can be, as a negotiator or somebody who's a facilitator, somebody in a business setting, or working in a kitchen in a monastery. You got to coordinate with people. So you're creative in all sorts of different ways. So yeah, it doesn't necessarily need to be in the arts, but that's where I'm coming at it from. But when I first gave a Dhamma talk, so right after I did my very, very first icon, that workshop that Ajahn Pasno asked if I would give a Dhamma talk at Abhayagiri, and I gave a series of 3 talks called The Artist Way, I think it's what it was called. And there's 3 talks on that. And normally, if you give a Dhamma talk, if you're a junior monk at Abhayagiri, you might get 1 or 2 people kind of commenting to you. It's like, or questioning, like, what did you mean by that? Or, hey, that was a nice talk. It was helpful. Thank you. And that's kind of like what happened for me when I was giving talks. And after I gave that talk, I think I got like 20 or 30 people contacting me, either emailing me or calling, or just coming up to me later and saying, that was really significant. Thank you. And I kind of got this impression. I think I was talking to you because you're a psychiatrist, but I can't remember what we said it was. But I kind of think there's like 3 or 4, but I think I got it down to 3 points at one way of way people learn, the way people are intrigued in things. And one is just sort of like through intellectuals, like you read it in a book, you process it, and you're learning that way. I think there's a third that learn through sort of like devotion and like creativity. And so I'm that kind of person. Like I learned by actually doing it, trying to solve it, fix it. Do you remember did we think of what the third one was?
We talked about the tactile. Some people learn visually, some people learn auditory, and the
tactile, yeah. Kinetic, is that like kinetic? Would that be like tactile?
Yeah.
Repetitive motion.
If you're writing and you see you're writing, you're seeing, and you're hearing, you have 3
okay.
inputs.
Yeah. So there's yeah. So there's
fits in with what you're saying.
Yeah, that would be. But I definitely see like there's different ways people learn, and not a criticism, but I kind of feel like the monasteries I've always been in, it's always been like you learn, you listen to a Dhamma talk or you're reading a book, so it's all very intellectual, and that's the way we teach. Like if you go to the monastery on a Saturday night or whenever they give their Dhamma reflections, that's the way it's kind of taught. But I had this realization that that's not actually how monastics are taught. We sew our own robes. We don't have bowl stand down here, but in Thailand, they often, and they started doing this in Abhayagiri, they make their bowl stands. And they're really quite intricate, really beautiful pieces of artwork. We crochet the bowl covers that are on there. There's a whole creativity in cleaning. It's like most forest monasteries are immaculately clean. I met some guest at, or someone came to offer the meal to Pacific Hermitage up in Washington, and I was like, "You look familiar." She goes, "Yeah, I was a guest at Abhayagiri, and you were the work monk." And she said, for the morning chore, you had me cleaning a perfectly clean hallway. And I was like, "Yeah, that's what we do at forest monasteries." There wasn't any dust there, but she swept for a half hour. What's he having me do? Be creative. Find some dirt somewhere. So, so let's see if there are any other questions. Okay. Yeah. But anyway, so just with creativity, it's like I did find that yeah, I kind of felt like the way monastics usually teach the world is just through one medium. So that's why I was like, okay, there's got to be other ways to do this. And when I did that first, I actually have this idea. At Birkin, I was actually scheduled. We actually had the list and everything, had all the art supplies purchased, and I was going to do a 10-day retreat with Sakula from the Portland Friends of the Dhamma. She's an artist, and her and I were going to do a 10-day retreat using creativity as a meditation retreat. And when I was with Father Damien, I did two icon retreats with him. I loved it because it was like, we got up at 4 a.m. We went to their morning service. We were part of their prayer service, had breakfast, did a little bit of chore cleanup. And then we had our session of learning and creativity. And we had the meal, joined their prayer service actually before the meal. Then you had the meal, a little bit of a break. And then we painted in the afternoon while the monastics were doing their kind of chores and work. And then came and joined them for evening tea. They had their dinner. We had tea, and then did their prayer service, and then we go and did a little more painting if we wanted to. And I was like, oh, that's so beautiful. Just like the structure for the retreat could be exactly like living in a monastery, just sort of, or a meditation retreat. Having pujas, doing chanting, a little bit of helping the monastery, but then like when work periods were happening, that would be where we would do the creativity. And but unfortunately, that got canceled. So I was like, yeah, how can we teach about Buddhism and meditation, also using creativity? So I got some ideas, but were there any other questions?
Yeah, there was the next question, I believe, from Sud. I put it on the screen.
Okay.
Can you see it okay, or would you?
Yeah, I can say when I was doing just that one painting of Ajahn Chah, I don't know if you were here when I started talking about this, but I took the very simple photograph of Ajahn Chah, and I painted it every single day. So I probably did paint that painting. I was thinking the other day, like 100 times. It was probably closer to like 500 times, just doing it over and over and over and over again. And one thing I learned, from that is just, say the perfection, we call paramis, of just determination. So it's like you're developing all sorts of skills, not just sort of being able to draw better or understanding the colors and the techniques there, but you're developing effort to do it every day, determination that you're doing that every day. Concentration, mindfulness as you're working. So all of the kind of path factors are being developed in that process of learning a skill and paying attention and being available for what you're learning. In terms of like I was mentioning this morning because I knew I was going to give this talk, so I was kind of thinking about it. But for a Christian iconography, what you would do is like if you were an icon painter, professional icon painter, which nowadays, I mean, actually before it was done by a guild, and you wouldn't even necessarily have to be a monastic. You'd just be like maybe employed by a monastery or employed by an iconographer. And it's basically the shop that did the icon. There might be a master who would do like the overseeing of it, but the iconographer, and especially kind of now, if it is sort of monastic or like a religious person who's doing the iconography, you might get commissioned to do an icon, either just from whoever. And then what would happen would be you would actually take a period of time, like maybe a month, to study about the saint that you were going to be painting or being commissioned to do or seeing, and you'd read up about the person, you'd study about them, you would fast, you would meditate and pray on the image. And then if the particular saint or person that you're going to be doing an icon of, you would read about them, and if they had particular qualities or practices that they did, you actually might even do like a self-retreat for a week or two, just taking on their practices. So you'd actually kind of get an intellectual understanding of what that person was doing or what they were about. And they say that people who are really skilled, like if you were known for as an individual and you were an icon painter, if you were known for wisdom and you were doing an icon about wisdom, many people who actually know how to read icons, because iconography means language or writing, so it is a visual language. I could get into another hour just talking about that, but they say that like the iconographer understands that quality about that person. It shows up in the painting, and it's really you kind of have to take it on faith unless you actually do know how to read an icon. There's a whole art in that, and but there are icons that are supposedly or are said to have like miraculous powers and things, and that does come through. And so you're learning these things as an icon, even if you didn't master it and couldn't portray it in the painting. But you are taking teachings and you're learning them, and I was still kind of in the beginning, I'd say beginning stages of kind of really understanding iconography, and a lot of them can come from visions, like say you're doing the prayers and the fasting, and so after I was doing some travels. And I spent a year actually living in a Catholic monastery. I lived for 20 years at a Bayagiri. And then when I left there, I spent a year at a Catholic monastery as part of a fellowship studying iconography. And I wanted to be able to write Buddhist iconography. I wanted to be able to do that. And so when I first came to be on a retreat at Birken, I was given a year to be on retreat. I don't think of it as prayer, but I was praying to see an image that I'd be able to paint. And I actually got a Christian image popped up into my head, and it was kind of a dream. And I told Ajahn Son, and he goes, "Oh, that's Mark. That's the story of Mark 2:23." And so I looked it up, and then I started using all the imagery that I had inside this dream that I had right after having this prayer that I wanted to see an icon. And I did it. And then a couple of my good friends are Catholic iconographers, and I sent it to them, and they go, "That is fascinating." It's like, that is really neat. And so the painting that I did was kind of a template for how to do that. It wasn't a kind of complete finished painting, but so I was just getting to the point where I was just sort of like, wanting. But I always felt I do have a lot of Buddhist images that I kind of did. I don't know if I didn't show any of those, did I? Or did I? Well, here's kind of just not really Buddhist, but it was sort of an idea for a triptych. You can raise it up a little bit and then tilt the bottom. Yeah, there you go. So that's that's an oak tree, but it was sort of like I had this whole idea of making triptychs that actually have a hollow place in the back. Go ahead and take that down. Can you see it? Can you see it? Yeah. That the back of the icon would be like a place to store your Buddha image, and then you can show it. And so that's a icon of Ajahn Mun. So I was doing, but these are all sort of like still from photographs, is what I was kind of talking about when you see it. And I was hoping to have like sort of an image of like, how would you paint the Buddha? Well, this is still from a photograph, but I think this is my favorite icon that I've painted. Have the back come towards me a little bit. The bottom. There you go. Yeah. So this is raise up just a little bit. There you go. So this image here was right before I left to Bayagiri. A huge fire came through and killed, I think it was like 12 of our neighbors. And the fire burnt completely around the monastery. It burnt completely around the Bayagiri and our next door neighbor, the Catholic monastery. But we didn't lose any buildings. It was absolutely a miracle. But this is one of our neighbors. Raise it up a little higher. This is our neighbor's Buddha image. It's the Abhayagiri image. And you see the hands got burnt off and the knee. Raise it up a little higher. There you go. The knee is burnt off, and then it's just covered in ash. And right in the middle of the chest, there looks like a little Buddha image there. Well, the person had an amulet on the Buddha, and it created this little heart or a little Buddha image right there on the heart. Okay, that's good. And then, but I had this, it's like I was hoping that I would get good enough that I would have visions to be able to do icons of Buddhist imagery. And I always felt too self-conscious. And it's like, I didn't want to try to do a painting of Mahamoggallana, or my image of the Buddha. It's almost like, because if you look at, Buddhist iconography, it's like, images of like, this Buddha here looks very different from the Buddha that's upstairs, and the Buddha that's over there, and the Buddha that's over there. They all are very, very different. And I don't know, it just didn't felt right to me to sort of say, this is what the Buddha looked like. And maybe I shouldn't, because it's like, well, there's already thousands and thousands of images that it shouldn't have bothered me, but it kind of did. And so maybe if I get back into iconography, that'll be something that's my fear, right? I need to look at that fear and then try to overcome that. Let's see, we've been talking now for, I saw the time on there a little bit. So we're over an hour. I appreciate everybody's plugging in for the Jody Powell's ramblings. Let's see here. Were there any other questions at the very end?
Maybe if you go down.
Or the other direction.
Yeah. Looks like there's a few more.
Yeah, immeasurable goodwill. Be creative with that. That's nice. Yeah.
There might be.
Okay, that's up above you.
That's a thanks. And
Yeah.
Anjali's Joseph.
Yeah.
Joe's.
So if I didn't get to your questions, I apologize. I was kind of distracted with showing images and asking people other questions, or just into my own voice. I'm not sure. But, thank you, everybody, and thank you to Aya and Bante for suggesting this. So tomorrow, or is there a talk tonight?
There is a talk tonight. It's from a monastic in Sri Lanka, I believe.
Okay.
And then there's a talk tomorrow morning, Suttas Dhamma talk tomorrow morning, and then monk chat tomorrow evening.
Okay. And that's Swijana is Aya is here from California, and she's doing the two tomorrow, right? Is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So tomorrow will be this time. I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about tomorrow, and then giving the Dhamma talk in the evening.
What I thought was monk chat was.
Tomorrow morning is an open theme Dhamma talk. I Sujana, and tomorrow night is a monk chat. There'll be a couple of us.
Okay, so there'll be a couple tomorrow night, and then is it Sunday? Is the day long here?
So Saturday evening here, 6 to 7:30. Dhamma talk meditation Sunday 1 to 4. Meditation program, and people are welcome to come and volunteer in the mornings, but also there's a lunch offering. Usually people come about 10:30,
Okay.
and lunch at 11.
Right. So if anybody's in the area and you want to come on, say Sunday for the work period in the morning, and then I'm probably going to do a guided meditation, afternoon practice on loving kindness, and I'm titling it "Why I Hate Doing Loving Kindness." So I think there's some real misconceptions about the practice, and so a lot of people do have aversion to doing meditation on loving kindness, and I understand why, because I think you've been taught wrong. Okay, please join us.
Can we take up to something to sadhu your
Sure, yeah, we can do that.
Antamayang tamo wanakatayo sadhu karang damase sadhu 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 Arimoyami.
Then we hit exit.
And breakfast.
Usually you would